there is a lot of parallels and reverse parallels, right? The reverse parallel is that the evil is good and the good is evil, right? So in this parallel of the film, the evil is doing a good thing. And here we are killing the evil because of its good, but the evil would have never came had we done the good thing.
Today we're going to be looking at Divergent and the Tomorrow War. Is it predictive programming or prophetic programming?
Find out on this episode of LED Live.
What's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining us today at LED Live. We got an exciting topic. We got our friend Larry here who's been investigating. We've had a lot of people ask us about, covering the Tomorrow War. Actually, we get that multiple times a day. So Larry actually did some investigation to see what he's seen in this movie, and he saw some parallels between not just this movie, but also a movie Divergent. So I actually haven't heard anything about Divergent, so I'm really interested to see what you found about that. I have heard some things about the Tomorrow War. A lot of people are saying that, this lines up with Bible prophecy, that in the end of times, the Antichrist is going to be going after those who keep the commandments of God, and it seems like there's some parallels like that in this movie. But when you watched it, you actually saw something a little different than what the majority of people are saying, because they're kind of just seeing a surface, maybe something that was said in one line of the movie, but you actually watched the movie as investigative research, not for entertainment, just so you know. It's a totally different thing. If you want to know, is this in context, let me look at it, and you're not sitting back like, oh, that was a fun movie. You're actually analyzing what's going on.
That is the truth. And we just want to make sure that folks know out there that we are watching the movie because we've made some very strong claims, right? We made some very strong claims that this Tomorrow War has something to do with God's last day prophetic church. And that because it speaks of the Sabbath, that means that, this is how it almost seems like they'll be looking to come after us in this manner. Right. Yeah. So I took the time out to say, well, let me see what the context is. Right. What I didn't hear was this is the seventh day Sabbath. That's what I didn't hear, right? And I didn't hear, and we have to make sure that we are very clear on the seventh day now, because these things are now changing around us. So I did go out and I did look to see what it was that, made this film different. And what I did was I did pull up a couple of clips. And one of the first clips I do want to show in this film is something that Alex brought out to me that changed it changed everything to the meaning of this film. So this clip that I'm going to show here is called Tomorrow War, and it's the beginning. It's just when the movie the plot begins to come through on the film. You've got an army that comes through. They jump through a portal, and they come through a soccer game that was just about to really get good. I believe it was Brazil versus Argentina, and Brazil gets they get this kick, and they're on their way to score, and all of a sudden this portal opens up, and you have humans that comes from the future. What we noticed was in this clip here I'm about to show, and I'm gonna let it go through really quickly. She's now coming in with peace. I'm gonna pause it here. The word pas, P-A-Z, means peace. Normally in the last name, was Alex was explaining to me, and normally in the last name it's La Paz, like the peace. But here they put pas as just peace, and look, notice the number 7, right? So in this war, in this commotion between climate change, which we're going to speak about, and also the pandemic, they want this worldwide peace. And in order to bring this worldwide peace, they have to have a day of certain rest. So you have peace and the number 7.
Nothing is put into a movie by accident. Some people think you're looking way too deep in this. Exactly. Dude, this guy didn't go to Goodwill and buy this shirt.
No.
There was somebody that worked on the set that specifically was told, put this guy's name, this number, and he's going to wear it. It's going to be right in this pan, this camera pan. It's going to come right in the screen. None of this was by accident.
None of it by accident. Now watch this. If I play this thing in real time speed, I'm gonna go back to the beginning of it. If I play it in real time speed, you will notice how quickly it flashes. It doesn't stick around. Now watch. She's walking through and boom. Just like that, it's gone.
Like before it's even
Exactly. As you see it, boom, it goes away. Just like that. So that just tells you this is subliminal messaging. Everything is done in messaging, right? Nothing is done by happenstance.
That's
so
right.
when watching this, now watch this. I don't speak and read Spanish, right? I just I may understand Spanglish, but not Spanish, right? It was Alex who showed it to me. He says, "Listen, you wouldn't have known what that really meant because they showed it in Spanish." Many of our English-speaking people just won't catch that, versus just people who are just watching the film altogether. And many of the pastors who have been preaching about this didn't catch that, right? Because you're watching it, you probably just got this clip from somebody else who spoke about it from somebody else that says something about the Sabbath. But this right here encapsulates the whole film because it just says that they have a message.
So have we been kind of narrow-minded about subliminal messaging? Like, can your brain still be affected if you're not understanding the language you're seeing? Some people are colorblind to certain colors, but it's still flashing. Can we still be affected?
Definitely.
So
Definitely.
I took a film study or a film writing class in college, and it was a script writing class. And so they really hammered in there. There's a method on how you write a script. You know, there's a formula sort of that they follow.
Yes.
And I can remember the one thing that really stuck out in my mind that the teacher kept hammering into our minds is everything is imagery. Everything is imagery. The more imagery that you layer into this thing, the more depth. I mean, sometimes, you know, there's certain movies that you have to watch 3 or 4 times to even like get what's going on and what's, you know, what's in the background. There's things that are written on the wall, things that are written on, you know what I mean? So I think this is very purposeful and, you know, even though you think you're not catching it, to whatever these people that are putting these things together, it means something to them, and they're putting that out there.
And that's what I wanted to show, because here we are making these claims, and most of the claims are just because we've heard one word, Sabbath, and then we take that because we understand Sabbath, we understand that word, so it's natural for us to go, oh man, are they speaking about us, right?
Triggered to 10.
Exactly. So, but then we have to realize 2 things. One, there's a scripture that tells us that, and I believe it's in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. 1 Thessalonians 5, it says, "For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travaileth upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." So here it is that they're asking for peace. They're saying they're going to bring in they're going to bring in peace. And everything is done by, out of chaos comes what? Order, right? Order out of chaos. So here it is, we have this full onslaught of chaos going on, even with the pandemic, even with all that stuff. And here it is that they're looking to bring in this new peace. But then what is Tomorrow War really about then? Right? What is this film really, the messaging, what is that messaging trying to tell us? And that's where we're going to talk about that today in depth. So one, the setting of Tomorrow War starts 2022. I found that to be very, very interesting. That's like next year.
Exactly.
Right?
Not too far.
Does it end in 2027? Just throwing that out there. Like.
So it starts out in 2022, and then it jumps 28 years after.
Okay.
28 years into the future is what from 2022?
28 years would be 40, 50.
2050. All right. So then we also have these sustainable goals that we must reach by the year 2050. Right?
You're right.
That we're working on right now. There are sustainable goals that globally we're working on to get to by 2050. So it's just amazing how it starts 2022, jumps 28 years into the future. And they're saying they're fighting this war in the future to save us before we get to the future. That's what I found very interesting. And the war that they're fighting is a pandemic war.
Really?
Yes, it's a pandemic war, and we're gonna show. So they talk about how in this war what our military will look like. So they reimagine the military. The military is now more global. It's a global military,
Of course.
right? And
Push everybody to that one world.
there you go. And the other piece is that it's more civilian, civilian soldiers. So now you have people who are now deputized to do what a soldier normally would do. And who are they calling? They're calling the moms, the dads, the grandparents to become soldiers.
So the question is, if it's the entire world is together, there's no more borders and all that, and everybody, even civilians, are part of the military, who are we fighting against?
Exactly. you have, so again, right here, if you look, you won't be fighting a war for your country, you'll be fighting a war for the world.
There's also a psychological component, I think, that when you see somebody in a common place doing something extraordinary, it's like we put ourselves in that seat in the movie. So when we watch that person do that, he's just a common person, but yet he's in this war fighting for this, that's me. You know, like you kind of place yourself in it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what that is. So you start realizing how different things start to look. So here's another clip in how they talk about fighting this war for the world. They're showing that now we're all global. She's asking for help. So they get to this stadium, soccer stadium, and you have tons of thousands of people in the stadium, right? So you're there live watching her saying, we need your help. We are you in the future. We need your help, right? And then you have millions of people around the world. This is during Christmas time, so this is just like Christmas Eve. So millions of people around the world at home with their families, right? And friends, and they all gather together around the television watching this. And all of a sudden, this people come out of the portal. And all the news is just like pointing to this thing, like, wow, this is happening. And people are attentive. And she now says, we need your help. And at that time she says it, they start deputizing civilians to become
Part of this war.
So this is called Tomorrow War. And here you have the news, future war. And what they're talking about here is how they will be deputizing different people to become global military.
Wow, that's
Is
kind of interesting.
it revealed yet who they're fighting at this stage?
At this stage, no, it doesn't reveal who they're fighting yet until
So all these people are joining the bandwagon.
all these exactly.
They don't even know.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. You have everybody from all walks of life joining in and being a part of this global army to go and to fight based upon the fact that, hey, we need your help. Now, who are they fighting?
That's the big
Well,
question.
I also find it kind of really interesting that what they're having here is these aliens, basically, or these people from a supernatural experience or another world or something, coming forth and telling them, "Hey, there's this thing that's going on. We need you to join forces with us." I mean, that's a little alarming to me, thinking that, you know, if the devil is going to use spiritualism in his final, like, you know, masquerade with everybody, yeah, I mean, if something supernatural out of the ordinary happens, you better bet people are going to listen to that.
So coming through a wormhole and saying,
If you're at a soccer game and all of a sudden, something,
Oh, you're gonna listen.
yeah, people are like, "Hey, dude, you need to do this." You bet. Look at how people are signing up for what's going on right now.
Right.
And
that's the thing. Everyone was like you know, it was like surreal. It was a film, but at the same time, it's almost in your mind.
Yeah.
You're playing it back as, man, if something has to happen like that.
Yep.
First of all, I would love to come through a portal,
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's kind of cool if I can walk through a portal. And the way they walked through the portal was kind of so cool that everybody kind of felt like, hey, wait a minute, are these aliens? Now going back to a show you guys done a couple weeks ago about aliens, this is exactly what they look like, right? They look like human aliens because they're coming through a portal. So regular people are looking at them like, wait a minute, are they us? And that's the reason why she said, we are you in the future. We are humans. but we're coming from the future, fighting a war. And I found it very, very interesting that once they all signed up and they're all sitting down getting debriefed, this is where you get the point of the Sabbath. So here is where they're all sitting down. You got all people from walks of life. You know, you got your regular person, somebody who's been in the military before, your mom, your pop, your dad, your uncle, somebody who's just an IT guy. You know, they're all there. You can see that his t-shirt says Science Center. You know, he's like a researcher in science. And this is the big thing, science rules. Science rules. So you have everyone sitting there, and as they're sitting there, they go through what they are now getting debriefed on. She says, hey, you're now part of the research program, right? The R team, and they're letting them know that they're going to be fighting against this enemy. And this enemy is an alien enemy called the white spikes. Okay? Now,
Is this their name or a name that they were given by humans?
A name that I believe that was given by humans.
Okay.
Which is very interesting because now they're talking about how, you know, they're going to be jumping through this wormhole and how they're going to get to this wormhole. And as they're talking about it, they then stop and pause and say, well, this certain alien group, the white spikes, rest on the Sabbath, but they work throughout 6 days. So they work 6 days and then they have a Sabbath. And he says that they call that the day of rest.
Every 6 days, the white spikes disappear. They crawl back into their nests.
We call it the Sabbath, their day of rest. And that's when we insert troops.
Okay, but why don't we have pictures or videos, would help us to know what we're up against?
The consensus was that if the public saw what they'd face when they reached the future, it would become virtually impossible to fill that hunger.
Okay.
And this is where we now got hung up because it's now the white spikes are God's last day people, and we are the ones taking a day of rest, and we work 6 days a week. Well, that could be anybody.
Right.
That could be any.
Depending on which 6 days.
They never said what day it was. It was never mentioned.
Yeah.
As to that, well, this is Saturday, the seventh day, and they take a rest and they work 6 days throughout the week. Then we can kind of glean on that and say, well, maybe that they're talking about us, right? But no. What they did was they made it very general and very vague in who and what they're talking about. But the whole point is that the white spikes seem to be doing the right thing because they came through climate change.
The aliens came through just climate change.
Yes.
Interesting.
In the film, they came out about because of climate change. And what you will see during the film is that there's a young boy who always talks about volcanoes. And they go back and realize, well, if we are to stop them in the future, shouldn't we have looked to see if they came in the past? And they supposedly had come into the past by crash landing into our country or into our Earth atmosphere. And while there was ice glaciers, hundreds and hundreds of feet, thousands of feet of ice glacier stuck, they were underneath the ice glacier. So how did they come about? Well, the ice glacier melted by 2028.
No.
So the aliens have been on Earth for a long time,
Exactly.
frozen, but because of our sin of, against the Earth, against Mother Earth. This is a terminology like the Pope is using at the United Nations.
And that's what you're hearing now.
Yeah, he's saying that climate change is basically a sin. It's we're sinning against Mother Earth, and he'll use terminology like that. And he even said that he thought that the pandemic was Mother Earth pitching a fit.
Yes, he didn't even say that.
The Pope saying he thinks coronavirus could be something of a response to humans ignoring climate change.
Yeah.
You will also see, so now you have two things. You got the military that is building for geopolitical issues, right? You see that coming around. So that's a global military fighting for geopolitical issues. And then you also have what they call diseases that are coming up through what? They call permafrost. When the permafrost melts, what happens? All the diseases are now coming up. So you got polio, you got all these other different types of
Now
diseases.
this isn't from the movie.
This is not from the movie. This is
stuff that
actual.
we are
This is
seeing.
yes. This is
Climate
stuff.
change.
This is climate change things that we are seeing.
Okay.
Right. So this got nothing to do with the movie, but you can clearly see what they're saying in the film is that because of the ice glaciers and the ice cap, the ice melted in those regions, the disease rose up and all of a sudden took over. They called them white spikes, and here we are fighting against them in the future, so it would not affect us when we get to the future. So they went to the future to fight these white spikes because now in 2050 they are fighting them because of 2022, we're living happily, but we are not realizing the damage of climate change and the pandemic that is caused by climate change.
I don't know why they call them white spikes. I don't know what color COVID is, but it is a spiky ball, you know. So it's almost like these aliens
Green
are some
spikes.
kind of a parallel to a virus or something, right?
Yes. So the aliens are parallel to the virus, right? They're parallel to the pandemic because during the film now, so they talk about the Sabbath, in which we're going to come back to, but during the film they also talk about the pricks that they had to make. These, what they call them, is a toxin. So they pulled the bacteria, they pulled everything from the main female, right, white spike. They got all of her,
Like the queen.
yes, they got everything from her, and then they created an antitoxin or something like that, which is a fluid that has to go into all of the white spikes to kill them. So they call that a toxin, and they prick them with these toxins in order to kill it. So you can see that this is a bacterial issue or a viral issue, right? That they had to take care of. So this is what the film is basically speaking on two things. One, a Sabbath, a rest, to help the climate, to release the climate from its position that we are in today, where we are doing so much to the climate. We're having diseases and climate change. But at the same time, to spare the climate from that, we need to obey climate change rules and make sure that as obeying climate change rules, there will be no more pandemics. The only way to do that is to have a certain day of rest.
To allow Earth to take a break and all that.
Exactly.
There's a clip from CNN that I just saw on a documentary, actually by one of the guys that is coming to join up and work with us here. That was really interesting. It was from CNN, and it was hidden camera. And it was literally of one of the technical supervisors of CNN. So it wasn't like one that was on camera, but one of the guys that's heavily involved in CNN on a deep level. And they start talking about climate change. And he was like, yep, people are so sick and tired of this pandemic thing. This is our new pandemic, and we will be pushing this in the future. And the person's like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean by pushing it? And he's just like, oh yeah, we are going to beat this dead horse until this is the new topic that's going to last forever.
Climate change?
Yep, and we're going to control this from the media's perspective. And so the person was like, well, who made that decision? Who's deciding that? And he was like, oh, well, it's the ones that are in control of CNN, our bosses that are doing this, and their committees are the ones that decided which direction we're going to go. And our whole new initiative, since Trump is now out of the government, right, and that was their evil person, this is their next thing that they're going to push. This is their evil person is the
climate change, and you can clearly see that because there's the Laudato Si, which is an encyclical by Pope Francis. He writes in there, Sunday, our participation in the Eucharist has special importance. Sunday, like the Jewish Sabbath, is meant to be a day which heals our relationship with God, ourselves, with others, and with the world. So you can see where they're pushing this. This is the encyclical, the Laudato Si. So everything right now is being pushed by this. This is the foundation, and we're going to build everything upon this foundation. And everything we're going to build is going to have tentacles, and all the tentacles are going to touch every aspect of life.
Right. Which this was presented at the United Nations in 2015.
Correct.
And then they were supposed to have another meeting that was supposed to happen months ago, but the pandemic pushed it, and so now it's going to happen in November, right?
It's called COP26.
Yeah.
Right? So this is going to happen in November, and they're going to push this even more, because right here you see at the end we will find ourselves face to face with the infinite beauty of God and be able to read with what? Admiration and happiness, the mystery of the universe, which with all of us share an unending plenitude. Even now we are journeying towards the what? Sabbath of eternity. So you can clearly see that this Sabbath that was talked about in the film is not the Sabbath that God intended or God created.
I just want to clarify something. So the slide prior to this said Sunday like the Jewish Sabbath. Now he's using the word Sabbath for Sunday.
Exactly. Exactly.
So using the terminology.
So the
Which is really confusing.
And this is why in the film we have to be very careful not to feel that this is talking about the Seventh-day Adventist Church or any other churches that who worship on the seventh day, right? Because it's not pointing to that. It's pointing to the fact that they take a rest. Now there is a lot of parallels and reverse parallels, right? The reverse parallel is that the evil is good and the good is evil, right? So in this parallel of the film, the evil is doing a good thing. And here we are killing the evil because of its good, but the evil would have never came had we done the good thing.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
See how that worked?
Yeah.
So that's
if we would have been resting like the aliens did, then they would have never came out because the ice caps would have never melted and all
There
that.
you go.
Yeah.
There you go. And here we are. They came out. So now we're killing them. And that's where, to me, I found it very interesting on the fact that they started working on this vaccines, and once they started working on this, they call it the toxin, right? Once they started working on the toxin, here it is that they now come in and they look at them. This is under the ice. They now found them under the ice in Russia, okay? And they go to them and they look at them and they realize, well, these things are sleeping. They're not even alive, okay? They fought a war in the future. They were losing. They realized we need to go back and see whether or not they're still here on Earth. Found them, and now they're about to administer the toxin into the creatures' bodies or into their sacks. So you can see them going. They're grabbing the toxins. Right, they're loading them up.
It's always green.
It's always green. It's always green. And I think green is the greatest color because it's easy for camera, right?
It always glows.
It always glows. So here it is that they're putting it into them, right? And then they shoot them with the toxin. Okay, they shoot them with the toxin, and all of a sudden you will start seeing that these things start to convulge, and then they go into this epileptic dance, and then once they finish that, they die.
Wow. So that's very similar when you get shot with something and you may convulse.
Is this a mixed message here?
Yeah, it is. It is, because what it is now. Watch this. What they're also showing is that
really gross.
This is unvaccinated creatures, right? Just think about that for a second. Had it been everyone is in this together, then we wouldn't have a problem. And this is the message that is being sent. So we always, in film, we have to watch what the message is. And we don't watch a lot of films as Christians. We don't really partake in that. But when you get someone that comes out and says, hey, and this is what caught my attention the most. How did they know that they're talking about a certain group of people? Who said that? Who sent you this clip that showed that they're talking about a certain set of people? The person who sent the clip had to watch the film to go, they're talking about, this is, and then when I saw this thing, I'm like, wait a minute, this got nothing to do, it has absolutely nothing to do with a certain group of religious people.
With killing Sabbath keepers.
It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the fact that we're sending a message that we want everyone to worship and to rest on a Sabbath.
Before we move on, you mentioned we saw the Laudato Si, where he said Sunday like the Jewish Sabbath, and then the next page he says Sabbath. I want you to see something interesting, because There is some confusion about the Sabbath in general.
Yes.
I've had lots of conversations with people. We keep the Sabbath. Fourth commandment says it's the seventh day of the week. Now,
right.
some people say, well, you don't really know what day the seventh day of the week is. Look, you can look at every language in the world, the seventh day of the week, as some form of Sabbath, whether it's Shabbat or Sabbato or whatever.
Sabato.
There's no question. There's no, unless you want to be confused about it, there's no question about what it is. And I used to talk to people about this issue, and I would screenshot what Google said, because I'd just simply say, what day of the week? What's the seventh day of the week? And it would say Saturday, and I'd screenshot it. About a year ago, that changed. I want to show you this, because this is really interesting. I'm just going to ask Google, what is the seventh day of the week?
Oh, wow.
Sunday. According to Wikipedia, the International Standard ISO 8601 for representation of dates and times states that Sunday is the seventh and last day of the week.
Now that just changed.
Wow.
That is crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
The very source that who doesn't go to Google for information, right? I mean, that's really fascinating.
They stopped
I want to know
printing
what Surrey
encyclopedias.
says. Can you ask Surrey?
Yeah.
I don't have.
They
You
stopped.
don't have Surrey.
They stopped
I make
printing
sure to
encyclopedias,
take that
man.
off.
Everything's on here
Smart.
Yeah.
now. But this is another interesting thing. I said, who changed the Sabbath day? Wait a minute.
Emperor Constantine I. According to Wikipedia, on March 7, 321, however, Roman Emperor Constantine I issued a civil decree making Sunday a day of rest from labor, stating, all judges and city people and the craftsmen shall rest upon the venerable day of the sun.
The Venerable Day of the Sun.
Venerable Day of the Sun.
But that wasn't what I meant to search.
It's
Watch.
amazing how you found that, though, right? Who changed the Sabbath? And it's clear that they changed it from the seventh day of the week, which was Saturday, to Sunday. And now they also changed the days of the week, which is now Sunday as the seventh day of the week. But your calendar says differently.
Yeah. Unless you're in Germany or something.
Right.
They do make calendars like that.
Yeah,
but
and those are always super confusing, because if you aren't aware of that, and all of a sudden you're just like floating through that calendar that has the 2 weekdays, weekend days on the same side, you just normally assume that Sabbath is the seventh day of the week.
Correct.
Now, what I meant to type instead of who changed the Sabbath day was this, which makes it confusing. So I said, what day is the seventh day of the week? It said Sunday. So they're saying Sunday is the seventh day of the week. Now watch this. What day is the Sabbath?
According to Britannica, the Jewish Sabbath is observed throughout the year on the seventh day of the week, Saturday. According to biblical tradition, it commemorates the original seventh day on which God rested after completing the creation.
It literally just said that Saturday is the seventh day of the week.
Right.
But when you ask what's the seventh day of the week, it says Sunday.
Sunday.
This is Babylon confusion,
And
bro.
this is what you call confusion.
Yeah.
As to why, when you look at this, when you look at films like this, that's pushing, first of all, we first started out with the word peace and the number 7 on the back of the athletic guys, the shirt
jersey.
of the jersey of the athlete, right? You see number 7 and the word PAZ, which means paz. In Spanish, it means peace. We started off there, and there's a message right there. Peace, 7. And then now you have to understand, what does that mean? Well, now in the film, now they talk about a Sabbath. Well, go back to what you saw in the beginning. Peace, 7, right? And then you can put the pieces together and start realizing, well, they're talking about, they have a message. And in this message, it's not about the white spikes being a certain religious group. No, the white spikes are doing something right that the world needs to understand, that if we do what they did, there's no need for white spikes.
It's going to be really confusing, because we can already foresee where the Pope's agenda and answer is. I think it's ironic that the United Nations, all the governments of the world are even asking some religious leader or whatever of the smallest nation on earth, the little horn, to come here and what is your answer? And I have a screenshot of Obama at the 2015 United Nations where he's right next to the Pope, and it says, Pope tells world leaders to heed to the Pope's message. No, Obama tells world leaders to heed to the Pope's message. And so they're not just saying, well, that's, the Pope, he's saying some nonsense. They're taking what he says as
As
serious.
yes,
As they announce him coming in as the Holy Father.
And when that was 2015, right? When he walked into Congress, right? Okay. So when you see things like that, you can glean from that every message now coming from Hollywood, right?
It's purposeful.
It's purposeful. And the media is literally to get to that subliminal part of your mind, the part of your brain where
plant seeds.
It's planting seeds. Now, we talked about Tomorrow War, but the next one is the contrast to Tomorrow War. We're going to compare and contrast now, because we can see clearly the Tomorrow War has a full blown out message: climate change, pandemic, and then arrest, right? Those are the main three things. But in Divergent, we have a little bit of a different turn, or a little bit different view, right? In Divergent, the word divergent, let's just look at the word divergent, what it means. First of all, the word divergent means moving or extending in different directions from a common point, differing from each other or from a standard, right? Now, look at the first word, the first definition. The word what you see that pops out in your mind is what? The word that pop.
Point.
You said what?
Common.
Common, right? That means everyone has to think and do and be what? The same, right? Okay, so we're looking at the word common. Now, Pope Francis says the what has gone global. The common good has gone what? Global. So now we take those two things now and we take the word divergent, and something is happening there. That means there's going to be a group of people who are not going with the common good, or a group of people who are not going with the standard. And what do we do with people who do not go with the standard? If everyone needs to be in the same line, they have this new term called lockstep. If everyone needs to be in lockstep and somebody diverges from that,
You step out of line.
you step out of line, then you must be what?
Go to a camp.
Yeah, exactly.
You must be punished, or you must be persecuted, or whatever it is, right? Because you stepped out of line. So this is what Divergent is all about, okay? The whole thing about Divergent is that what caught my eye is that you have a bunch of different factions. You have abnegation, the selfless. You have amity,
This is
peaceful.
from the movie?
Yes.
Okay.
You've got candor, which are honest. You have the erudite, which are the intelligent ones, or the scientists. And you have the dauntless, which is your fearless, or your police force. Okay? All right. So now you have all of this. The whole film is literally based on, I'm going to show you a couple clips here. The whole film is literally based upon a young girl who grew up in the abnegation faction. The abnegation faction are more so your Christian faction.
They're others focused.
They're your Christian faction, right? How do we know? Well, two things. We have you have the group that's the Christian faction that has rule over the government. America was found as a Christian nation, right? And then you have them also who are selfless. They don't believe in vanity. When you look at them, they are dressed in simplicity. They live a simple life. They take care of the poor and needy. They do all the things that a Christian group ought to do. This is abnegation. The word abnegate means to remove yourself from that, to take away yourself and to do for others. Okay?
Sounds like heaven.
Yes, it almost sounds like heaven. So when I looked at this film, I said, well, I looked at this film I can probably tell you about 14 times now. It came out in 2009. Okay? And every time I looked at it was because there's a message and I found something new within the message. In this beginning of the film, this young lady is getting her hair trimmed by her mom. And the mother is talking about how it is to live in this life of selflessness. If you look at them, you can see that they almost look Amish-like, right? No earrings in the ear, no makeup. They do not look in the mirror too long because they don't believe in being vain. I'm gonna pause it here. Take a look at how she's dressed.
Yeah.
You can see, yes, earth tone. You can see this thing is just simple, right? Now, what type of religious group should be this? Should behave this way? God's people should be what? Peculiar, right? Look different from the world, right? But at the same time, help those in need, right? Give an encouraging word. So you're supposed to be selfless. The Bible tells us that if any man pick up his cross, let him pick up his cross. And if any man wants to follow me, pick up his cross and do what? Deny himself and follow me. So we have that there, right? So you can see that this young girl she's living that life of selflessness, okay? And as she goes through the, as she goes through the film in her life, you start to see things change. The way that she's supposed to grow up at a certain point of time, she's supposed to make a decision as to which faction she wants to be in. Her brother and herself are at the age of accountability and to make a choice. Okay, so I found it to be very, very interesting. Now, when she did that, here she is as a little girl growing up with her family as a young person who is understanding the rule of life as a regular person, as simple. You can see that they're simple. They're helping others out. This is what abnegation does. Okay.
Isn't it interesting that they're always like wearing gray?
Yes, because gray is like that tone.
Like
cold. They are the leaders of the government. They are the ones who run the government. So it's a Christian nation that runs the government. The Christian faction runs the government in this film. I found it very interesting because America is the same. Right? Or was the same, because the Bible says that this two-horned beast will be as a lamb, but then eventually speak as a dragon. So I said, okay, what else in this film I can pull together, because there's differences between that and Tomorrow War, right? What's going to be the issue that they will soon have? Well, as we were going through the film, and I noticed a few things. One, science becomes the ruling faction. Okay, science becomes the ruling faction, and once you go over that, and you start realizing that this thing starts taking over, eventually it takes over the government, and people start looking to science for everything. Are we into that phase of our lives today? Yes. Same thing happened in the film. So what I looked at, I said, wait a minute, how do those two, kind of mirror each other? What is the issue that you start to see?
Right, and what changes? How does society change?
And how does society change? Well, two things. One, it happens with children, right? As they get older, you start seeing that children walk away from what they believe. And as they walk away from the belief, you start to see that things start to change as they get older in their mindset. So here, her brother and her brother walked away from the belief of the family. They walked away. Her brother went and joined the erudite, which is the scientists, smart ones, right? And she joins the dauntless, which is the police force, okay? Not knowing that the same government that her brother joined, the smart ones, right? The scientists and those who work in government, he joins that group, she joins the police force. Those two forces start to work together to eliminate the abnegation.
Interesting. So the ideologies of all these are very different.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yet the children growing up in these separate worlds have a choice where they want to go and who they want to join with. In a sense, it's always this re-education.
Exactly.
Wow.
So as you can see in our education system, what's going on? We send our kids to school. They tell you that you have a mind, that you can choose to be whatever you want to be. And the child will take that on, grow up, and become whatever they want to be. They choose then to walk away from either what the teachings of the family or the home taught. As we know that the home is your first school.
That's right.
So once you leave out of your home and you're re-educated, then you get to choose whatever it is that you want. And this is exactly what happened to those two children. They chose, and in the film you can see the burden of the parents. They just kind of gasp, right? Because now their children are walking into something they don't have no clue of.
Like a prodigal.
Yes. So and here it is, the moniker now is faction before blood. Faction before blood, meaning that once you choose your faction, you cannot go back.
That's a lot like the Amish, actually. I don't know if you know that in the Amish community, when you reach age of 16, they basically let their child have a big party because you're an adult or whatever, and usually they're getting wasted with all their friends, and at that point, they get to live as an adult. It's in the community. I mean, they live together in a commune. But basically the parents step back and they say, this is your chance to choose whether you want to go into the world or you want to stay with us. And a lot of them go into some heavy, I think it's like for a year.
Yes.
And a lot of them will get into drugs. They start, dating and doing stuff. One thing that's interesting is the females often will still wear the head wrap, will still wear the modest clothes because they're still kind of shy about that stuff, but they'll still drink and all that stuff.
They have parties.
And the guys will be selling drugs and everything, and the majority of those kids come back. They go back. Yeah. But if they don't, if they're in the rare case where they decide they want the world more, they can't ever talk to their family again.
Yes, because they have to be excommunicated. They have to be excommunicated. They cannot bring that nonsense back into the community, right? So that's what happens in this film. There's no going back.
Wow.
Once you are who you are. Till that's it, till you die, right? The thing is that the problem is that Triss still feels, the girl still has a longing for her home, right? And she starts to learn that she's a divergent. She doesn't believe in the ideologies that they are now pressing upon, right? Remember, you have 5 different factions, and then the last faction is what they call the factionless. These are those who they're not placed, right, in a faction.
Black sheep.
Yes, these are the ones that turned away from what they chose. Once you turn away from what you choose, then you cannot go. You have no place to go. You become factionless. You have no home. You have no life. There's nothing that the society is going to give to you, right? You're living underground.
Literally underground.
Literally.
I was gonna say I've seen stuff like that where there's a group of people.
Yeah, they
underground,
live underground. That's exactly what happens. So she learns she's a divergent, meaning that she's going away from the common good. And then she now ends up going to her brother. She ends up going to her brother and telling her brother, "Listen, I'm in trouble."
The brother hasn't diverged, right?
The brother,
he hasn't diverged.
He's
from
still in the science community.
He's in the science community, right? So she goes to him. And she tells the brother, "Listen, I'm in trouble and I need your help," right? Now, the young man he's liking where he is, and he has what you called assimilated into his new role and into what he does, and into the ideology. He's assimilated into it, right? And she tells him now she's in trouble. He goes to her and says, "Hey, first of all, why are you here? You shouldn't be visiting me." That's the first thing.
Really?
Faction.
No crossover at all.
Faction before blood.
Wow.
Faction before blood. And she says, "Listen, I'm in trouble, right? First of all, I don't belong in Dauntless, okay?" He says, "Well, yeah, they're crazy people in the first place. You probably should never have gone, right?" But she says, "No, there's something different. There's something going on, right?" And then he tells her, "Listen, you can't go back to abnegation. First of all, we are going to take over abnegation. We're going to run the government from now on." And she says, "Why? As a nation, we always have been, because we're selfless. We look for we do it the right way, the way it's supposed to be done." He says, "No, no longer. We're going to take over, and we're going to rule this nation going forward, right? It's going to be under science that rules the nation. I said, wait a minute.
Well, look at what's going on.
Look what's going on today. Look what's happening today. And then as she walks away, she tells him, faction before blood. And he goes, right, faction before blood. That means whatever you have chosen in your life, you have picked a side. You cannot go. Now, what's the blood that's being, if you really look at this, the word blood, there's only one blood you can focus on in this. It's either you choose world or you choose the blood, right? It's either that. It's either that. You're hearing the world before the blood. I look at it as we have to choose the blood of Jesus Christ.
That's right.
Right? That's the only way we can do it. That's the only way we can survive this. So when I heard faction before blood, I said, wow, the world before Christ. You're going to choose one of them.
Or in this case, a science-based government.
Yes. In this case, a science-based government. And, you know, and that's exactly what we see, what we're seeing today. So as it is right now, she learns at that point that there's something way different. Her brother has changed. She tells her brother, listen, they're going to manipulate you. They're manipulating you here. Your mind is not your own. You are not an independent free thinker anymore, right? That's what a divergent is. A divergent is somebody who independently has their own mind. They can think freely for themselves. No longer are you part of that anymore.
Which is supposed to be what the point of education is, free thinking.
Free thinking.
Not being manipulated or led down a particular path.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So when I mean, all the parallels were working with me. So I'm like, wait a minute, Divergent and Tomorrow, the two messages are simply totally different. Here it is. You're going to have a group of people that are going to have to be free thinkers and stand on what they believe. She was a divergent. Anybody who stands on what they believe is going to be deemed a divergent, right? They called her a stiff because she stood on what she believed.
That's right.
She wouldn't bend.
She wouldn't bend. And she was different. She came from abnegation. When you come from abnegation, as you know, the Christian faction, they called you stiffs, right? And I went and I said, wait a minute, there's something that was written in Inspiration that talked about people becoming or being called stiffs, right? It says here, when we reach the standard that the Lord would have us to reach, worldlings will regard God's people as odd, singular, straight-laced extremists. We are made a spectacle unto the world and unto the angels and unto men. So right there, that tells us that we too will be called stiffs. Straight-laced mean that you are a stiff. And I said, wow, this is too many parallels. If there was supposed to be a film that anybody would have said that, yeah, they're pointing to a certain group of people, it'll be this one, right? It'll be Divergent, right? Because you figure this is what we ought to be. We cannot go with the common good. We cannot just go, you know what everybody else is doing, so we got to do it too.
So what's the final message that they're getting to? I don't know if you're getting to that.
I'm about to get to that. Yes. And that's a good question. If you want to finish your question, I'm about to get to that as well.
Yeah, no. I'm curious to see.
I wonder what angle
okay, so so it's like, you know, often that lead character is the protagonist, right?
Yes.
And so, you know, you would think that's a good thing that you're, you know, maybe you jumped ship and you're now questioning the group that you were a part of. And you're being drawn back to your roots. And, you know, I mean, you could see a lot of parallels there. Is that a good thing?
Well, I'm going to show you here where you can see the differences. She's in this part of the film here. This is where the film takes a major turn for her. She now speaks to the person who leads out the erudite. Okay, and she is the leader of the area, and she's the one who's going to take over. She sits her down and she tells her, listen, what I want you to do, what I want you to understand is that we are taking over abnegation, because abnegation has broken the rules. They are not abiding by the rules that we have set.
Who is that?
The erudite.
Right, but isn't that how it's supposed to work? Because it's a different world?
It's a different world, right? So they're not abiding by it.
Interesting.
Now watch this. Because they're not abiding by it, and they're harboring divergence.
Okay.
You see, in this faction, which is the abnegation, they have divergence. Because why? These are self-thinking people. We want to get rid of the divergence. That's our job, is to get rid of the divergence.
Those who are questioning the main narrative or whatever.
Exactly. If you question the main narrative, if you speak against us, if you post anything that goes against the narrative, we need to get rid of this certain group of people.
Dude, I just saw a video clip of an official government person in New Zealand. She was talking to the camera and she was like, look, we are your source of truth. If you hear anything else that's not from us, it is not true. Do not believe anything unless it comes from us. We are your source of truth.
Wow.
I was like, I cannot believe this lady is saying these
And
words.
that's amazing. That you have one narrative, one message, and you have to believe and walk with that message. Now, in here, she also said that human nature is the problem. And we need to eradicate that. I'm here to make that change, she says. I'm here to be the leader because I have the vision of eradicating the human issue. Human nature is the problem. It's human nature that we're liars. It's human nature that we're killers. It's human nature that we do all these wrong things. And I'm here. We're here, erudite, to fix that issue. And obviously, abnegation lost that fight.
Right.
You see? So when you hear that Christianity loses the fight on the issues of the world, then you know that something else is taking over. And now they're looking to force. They're looking to cause all men to do something, right? And now the next thing is you would see is that they're going to be talking about a certain vial that goes into the body. What? Yes.
Again.
That causes again. Yeah. That causes now for it to be for your mind to be susceptible for control. Okay? For your mind to be susceptible to control. So when I saw it, I said, wait a minute. Again, with this whole inoculation situation.
We can fix it with a solution.
If we can fix, yeah, exactly. I said, wait a minute. This is way too much. The parallels and the contrasts are way too much. So now here they are on top of the roof, and this young man who's her partner, her friend, he is showing that, listen, Dauntless, the faction Dauntless, which they're both a part, and Erudite have worked together. This is the government and this is the police or the army, the force.
Church and state.
Church and state have now come together to do what? To create what you call that vial in his hand, which goes into your body, which causes susceptible thinking, which causes you to be, to have mind control.
Wow.
Okay? And I said, wait a minute. So now they're saying this is what they're going to use. They can create a whole army. And they're like, to do what? Create an army to do what? And the whole point is to get rid of divergence. But you think divergence come from every other faction. But no.
They only come from that one.
They only come from that one group of people.
The people that were gray and selfless and all that.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. So in here.
Well, doesn't everybody start that way though? Or no?
No.
Okay.
No.
They're the ones that are running the government and stuff. But that's fascinating.
Yes. In here, you will find out now, as they all become.
Before you go on, these divergents, are they keeping to themselves, or are they like bringing other people into their camp as well?
They're not bringing them. They're just
living their lives.
Yeah, but what happens is you don't know that you're divergent until things start to take place that you're not going along with. You're not going along with it. I have a different mindset, right? And how they find out that you're divergent, they put you through these tests, right? Where she was in a thing of water, where in her mind, in these dreams, she can either drown or try to figure out how to get out of it. Well, she says this is not real. She breaks the glass and walks right out of it, right? She's in a field of fire with birds coming after her. She said, "This ain't real. I'm about to just wake up out of this." So I'm not the one that you're gonna scare off. I'm not gonna be the guy that you're gonna try to cause me to have fear. So they put them through these fear tactic training or tests to see how they react, and she just did not abide by any. She wasn't afraid
You know,
of none of that.
we go through that stuff all the time in the public school system. I remember these tests, and it's a lot worse now that I'm not in school. But our daughter goes to a small Christian private school. But in public school systems, they'll often have to take these tests, and I've heard teachers come out and tell the public they got out of the system because of this. Your students, your children in school will have to take a personality test.
Yes.
And it's something that doesn't get graded, it doesn't get sent home to your parents never see it, and your kids probably don't think anything about it, telling them. But there's little questions in here, like if you were in a boat with two other people and the boat starts drowning and one of those persons is maybe homosexual or something like that, who gets thrown out of the boat? Or there's like these options. Do you do A, you throw this person out? Do you do B, this? And there's no option for like, well, maybe I get out of the boat and I push it, and then somebody else we swap, and they're like, no, that's not an option.
No.
They're trying to figure out what
you would do.
Dude, this stuff all gets, this stuff all gets stored somewhere,
outside of the normal common sense type thing. But they want to see how your brain works. And that's exactly what they did with this young lady, right? She passed all the tests. How she did it was her friend says, listen, he too is a divergent. He says, you cannot show them that you are a divergent because that's who they're after, right? So you have to figure out a way to get out of these tests the right way. Like if this thing is, if water's coming up and you see there's a pipe spewing out water, take your coat, stop the water. That's how you would be able to pass these tests. So she ends up passing the test, and she's now called a Dauntless. She's now officially part of the Dauntless team. And
they think she's officially been brainwashed.
Yes, and they're all gathering together, and they're all, they call them up and say, hey, listen, you're gonna line up in fours. He says, don't worry about it. This man says, don't worry about it. We all need you to line up in fours, and you're all gonna get pricked.
What?
No. You're all gonna get pricked. We need to be able to make sure we know where you guys are at all times.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Okay? So as you can clearly see, she's not looking for her friend. She's like, wait a minute, the same guy who showed her the vial, she's looking for him and saying, where is he at? Because, she understands that he's a divergent, she's a divergent, right? So she's not trying to get pricked. Here she goes walking away. He stops her, and as he stops her, he forces her to get pricked.
No. That was her friend?
No, boom, she just got pricked just now. So you see how they did it? This guy stops her, talks to her, and says, you should have been in the front of the line to get pricked. But I'm gonna make it easy for you. And boom, they pricked her.
Wow.
You see, she was walking away from it because, again, she's a divergent, right? She doesn't want to get this thing in her body. She's moving from it because she understands what it's all about, right? Now, the conclusion of this whole thing is, again, they're looking to get rid of the abnegation. So they have a full-on takeover, full-on military force takeover, and they take over by force. And here it is that they're coming. And they're coming by swarms. And she is a part of this crew. This is Dauntless. Dauntless is your force. You can see everyone's face is, they're being controlled by the transponder that's within.
Some robots.
Exactly. This is full robots, and she's a part of it with her friend. But you can clearly see their faces are looking different from everybody else's. Right? Although they got pricked, they're not a part of them. Both of them came from abnegation. They both came from a Christian faction. And they're both now realizing they're in the wrong group. He has been training he's been training Dauntless for a long time, not realizing that one day this same team or same group of people will turn and go against the family and the friends that he loves. Okay? And as they're walking towards them, they start picking them out, pulling, and she goes, I need to get my family out of this. I need to find my parents. And here is where you start seeing even the little kids that were playing in the ground, they run out because they're coming after abnegation. You can see them going home to home, door to door, pulling them out. Okay? Wow. And this is exactly what's going to take place. Now, if there's any film
Wow.
that should have been called something that says maybe this can be a part of a certain group of people who worship on the seventh day of the week, on a Sabbath, it would have been this film.
Wow.
Because at the end of the day, they're looking for those who stand up for what's right.
That's big. That's an excellent point, because I'm reminded of, I believe it's Matthew 24, when Jesus is talking to the disciples, what to look out for in the end times and to brace yourself for. And he goes through a bunch of kind of events, catastrophic things are in your face, earthquakes and these things and storms. But the first thing he actually says is, do not be deceived, right? So in comparing these two movies, you have the Tomorrow War that has all these trigger words, Sabbath and all that, and everyone's focus is on that because that's the big stuff. There weren't those trigger words in Divergent, but look, that's probably where our attention should have been, and to see all these parallels, the subtleties, exactly.
All these very subtleties are there. And it blew my mind because now you saw that this is a series, right?
Yeah.
Guess what's in part 2? They go to the country and they're living in the country.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, seriously.
It's just crazy. Yes, they run away to the country to live in the country.
You know, what's really interesting, have you ever done a little bit of research on like who wrote this? What else have they done?
Yes.
Because sometimes, you know, if you have a director like the guy that made The Truman Show, he's also made a slew of other things that are like very Gnostic in its like interpretations, and you can pretty much bet like, wow, this person has a vendetta against this, you know, idea or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
What I noticed when I did the Terminator breakdown is if you just watch part 1, you're going to get a totally different story than if you watch the whole thing. Because in part 1, it looked like, okay, Terminator, he's a bad guy, he could be Satan, and then there's John Connor, he's the savior of the world, his initials are JC, and it looks like a very biblical thing. But then part 2, Terminator's the good guy. Part 6, Genesis, they kill John Connor.
Yes.
And that's so what I'm wondering is if, I still don't know how this movie ends, but I wonder if all 3 parts tell a different story, you know?
It kind of almost does, because in the third part of this Divergent series, they end up realizing that there's a higher power.
Oh.
Yes.
Outside
of this, you know, apocalyptic
dystopia
type of world that they're living in. Because the way the film begins, it says that there was a war, right? And they were the only ones that were left. The entire world that was destroyed. And they built up a wall to protect the people. And they created these factions, is what they did, right? And this is how the film begins, okay? And it's not a utopian type of a world. But when they end up going from part 1 to part 2, they realize, okay, that they're on the run in part 2 because their divergence, they end up, you know, stopping the execution of all these abnegation, right? Christian folks, they stopped it, and now they're on the run. Abnegation, all of them are on the run. They end up in the country with the other faction called Amity. Amity are they're the ones that's peaceful. Right, because they're out there in the grass and they understand nature and they all happy. They look like hippies, right? Okay, so that they end up going out there with those folks in the country, hiding in the country. And I'm saying to myself, wow, if this is not a big
flee to the mountains and all this
they
stuff,
flee to the mountains, because now they were living in the city, and this whole thing was taken. Now guess where this whole thing was shot. Just take one guess. No, Chicago.
Chicago.
Yes. It was shot in Chicago.
Concrete jungle.
Yes, and I'm not talking about nothing was done in a set. Nothing was done in Hollywood. Everything was literally done in Chicago.
Interesting.
They closed off streets and everything because they wanted the real city feel, right? And they built the set and everything in Chicago. Wow. Right? They used everything out there. And then they ran off to the country, leaving the city because they realized that in the city was the major problem of them trying to kill off the abnegation.
Oh, wow.
And I said, wow, this is amazing. Now in part 3, they realized outside of the wall, that they've been behind this wall for so long, outside of the wall was a higher power that controlled everything mind and everything that they did.
Uh-oh.
And the reason why is because the higher power wanted those who were divergents to spread the message of being a divergent.
Oh, wow.
So what do you interpret that as? Because, I mean, we look at a lot of Gnostic flips in these movies. If they notice that there's a higher power who really wants the message of the divergency to be spread out.
It's the same thing as Gnosticism at the end of the day.
That's what I was thinking.
It is Gnosticism at the end of the day.
Rebellion is kind of like straying off. When I first saw the definition of divergent, I was thinking, yeah, it's like straying off from, do what thou wilt instead of following the law type thing.
Now, go ahead. You were gonna say something?
No, go ahead.
That's the whole thing of reverse parallels. Now we're going back to reverse parallels because now, does Christ want us to be a divergent? No, because that means we are actually doing what the devil wants to do. Do as thou wilt, which is the whole of the law.
Right. And exactly what Jesus is saying is like, whoever does my will, what is his will? To love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and to love your neighbors yourself, which is an encompassment of the law.
Exactly.
They suck you in with these heart-pulling stories like, oh no, they're going after the good people and all this, and then they flip it on you by part 3.
Yeah.
Well, to be in the faction of Christ is to be a divergent for the world, in a sense.
In a sense, yes. In a sense, but that's a very good point. To be in the faction of Christ is to be a divergent to the world, right? Because remember, you have to either choose Christ, which is the blood, or the faction, and that's what's so important, because it's faction before blood. What does that mean? That means, listen, either you accept the blood of Christ or you accept the faction of the world. And there's no middle ground. There's no middle ground. There's no gray area. And at the same time, the reverse parallel is the devil says, well, do as thou wilt. That is the whole of the law. So we have to be able to be very careful in all these films that we that we watch. And a lot of things, I watched this and I was talking to a lot of young people about this stuff. Because I said, many of us watch this stuff for entertainment purposes. The devil is not about the entertainment. He's about securing minds. And God is about securing hearts. So we have to either be on God's side and have our hearts secured, because one day this all will take place, and it's taking place even now. It's starting to build.
Right. Yeah, the foreshadowing of what's actually going on. I mean, for many times on this show, on this channel, and even in this ministry, we've talked about these movies as being this, like, sort of driving force, that's kind of putting out there what's going to happen in the future, but really pushing people into a worldview or a worldly character or something, and that's not what God's wanting us to have or be at all. He's asking for us to hunger and thirst after righteousness. It's not just like, fight against what's going on and rebel against the system, and it's really, I think, a moral character is what God is really after.
That's right.
So coming to the prophetic side of all of this, you have the Bible and you have these movies kind of telling similar stories, or the same story from different perspectives, showing probably what Satan wants to happen in the end time, and then what Christ is prophesying will happen in the end time. Which will you give your attention? Which are you preparing for?
Right. And that's why, is it prophetic programming or is it predictive programming? Well, there is a bit of everything in that, right? I mean, when you cook, you got to have some seasoning, you got to have some salt, you're going to have some pepper, right? So there's a bit of both in there in terms of the prophetic programming, because the prophetic programming tells us that there's going to be a split in our society. You can clearly see that now. There are factions in our society.
That's right.
Right? You can clearly see that you have the vax and the unvax. That's going to be a split. And then you're going to have a split because of racism. You're going to have a split so you have all these different factions going on. The Bible says it's going to come down to 2. Rich and the poor, right? That's it. So you're going to have those 2 in terms of the financial faction. Then you have the old and the young. Then you have the free and the bond, right? These are factions written in Revelation chapter 13, right? You're going to have these type of factions. So that's the prophetic piece. The programming piece lets us know how the media is programming our minds to either choose a side. Either we're going to be on the dauntless and come after God's people, or we're going to be God's people being able to have that love and to accept what's about to take place in our lives.
That's right, yep. It's coming down to the wheat and the tares, the sheep and the goat. You're gonna have to choose one side. That was a really good breakdown, man. I really appreciate you doing that, because we've had so many requests for the Tomorrow War, but you gave a whole new insight to this Divergent thing. So like Kendi was saying, you know, we need to keep our eyes on, both of these are prophetic. Satan knows the end. He knows the prophecies, what's gonna happen, and so does God. But Satan is out there pumping out his side, and he's saying, no, you want to be on my side because this side is, you know, it doesn't look fun or whatever. He's making his side look glamorous and attractive, and not knowing that it all leads to death and destruction. We want to choose the right side. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you guys next week. And comment below.
I love it. I mean, I can't watch enough of it.
It's the duelist who they say can speak with the spirits. The sins will destroy the commandments forever.
A suspicious list of names prompts an investigation at a local school and concern from parents.
The Death Note is derived from a Japanese animated show.
The girl told authorities she got the idea from a Cartoon Network show.
Mom, it's Mr. Satan. I recognize that voice anywhere.
Visit our brothers at schoolforprophets.tv and watch From Babylon to America, which has over 5 million views on YouTube alone. And follow it up with America to Babylon. Check the description below for links to this and more.